Across the silent darkness of space, the Earth drifts beneath us, turning slowly like an ancient clock. Its deserts, its oceans, its mountains, all glowing softly under the pale light of distant stars. And within these vast landscapes lies a story, older than memory, older than writing, a story humanity has tried to understand for thousands of years. A story whispered across civilizations, carried through myth, carved into stone, and retold by sailors, scholars, and dreamers. A story of a city that vanished not into the ocean, but into time itself. Tonight, we descend from the quiet of the cosmos into the golden silence of the Sahara, into a world where the wind has erased almost everything except questions, into a world beneath the world, a world buried, forgotten, and waiting. A question has echoed across centuries. What if Atlantis never sank? What if it simply disappeared beneath the shifting sands of Africa? What if the greatest lost civilization on Earth has been hiding in plain sight? The desert keeps its stories well. Every grain of sand is a page from an unwritten book. Every whisper of wind carries a fragment of something ancient, distant, and familiar. But beneath these dunes rests something extraordinary. A perfect circle, 40 kilometers wide, carved into the earth like an ancient scar. The Eye of the Sahara, a structure so immense it can only be seen from the sky. Some say it is nature. Others believe it is memory, a remnant of a world erased by water and by time. For thousands of years, Plato's words have lingered like a riddle, a city of rings, land and water intertwined, a kingdom beyond the Pillars of Hercules, destroyed in a single day and a single night. Breathe slowly. Let the world fade. Let curiosity guide you, not into fear, but into wonder. Because some stories refuse to die. Some places refuse to disappear. And Atlantis may be one of them. For thousands of years, the legend of Atlantis has lingered like a quiet ember in the collective mind of humanity. But if we truly want to understand where the story began, we must return to its earliest author, the Greek philosopher Plato. In two dialogues, Timaeus and Critias, he described a world so detailed, so precise, that scholars still debate whether he was recounting myth or memory. Plato claimed that the story did not begin with him. Instead, it came from Solon, one of Greece's greatest lawmakers, who heard it from Egyptian priests in the city of Sais. They told him of a civilization far older than Greece, a mighty power that existed 9,000 years before his time. If true, that places Atlantis around 11,600 BCE, a moment aligned perfectly with the end of the Younger Dryas, a period of global upheaval. In Plato's telling, the priests described a vast empire beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the ancient name for the Strait of Gibraltar. Beyond this threshold, they said, lay a great island continent, a place of concentric rings of land and water, so harmonious in shape that it appeared crafted, not carved by nature. And at its center stood a capital city, radiant with temples, canals, and towering walls. Plato did not present Atlantis as a dreamlike utopia. He spoke of a real geopolitical power, a naval empire capable of crossing oceans, waging war, and spreading influence across the ancient world. But he also wrote of its downfall, a people who grew corrupt, forgetting the virtues that had once made them great. And in a single day and night of misfortune, their island disappeared. Scholars have long argued that Plato invented the tale to teach a moral lesson. But his description is unusually specific, down to measurements, distances, and the geological layout. When a story becomes that detailed, it begins to take on the weight of something remembered, something observed, something preserved through generations of retelling. The priests told Solon that Atlantis lay west of the Pillars, in the Atlantic. But here lies the puzzle. No island that large exists in the ocean today. And so for centuries, explorers searched the sea, diving into myths of submerged continents. Yet the ocean floor offered no convincing candidate. It wasn't until modern satellite imagery emerged that eyes finally turned to the Sahara. The Sahara was not always a desert. 12,000 years ago, it was a world of rivers, lakes, and fertile plains. A world capable of supporting life on a massive scale. If a civilization ever thrived in that region, the landscape itself would have preserved their presence until the sands buried it beyond recognition. When satellite photographs revealed a massive circular formation in Mauritania, 40 kilometers wide, scholars dismissed it as geology. But explorers saw something different. They saw the concentric rings described by Plato, rings of land and water, rings of a forgotten world, and the possibility that Atlantis had never sunk at all, but had been buried. If the Eye of the Sahara is indeed Atlantis, then its current dryness hides the story of a much wetter past. Plato's account describes a land rich with water, canals, and fertile soil. Geological evidence now confirms that this region once had consistent rainfall, complex waterways, and even large lakes, a perfect match to a once living world. Plato claimed that Atlantis was larger than Libya and Asia combined. This detail confused readers for centuries. But if we understand the phrase through the lens of ancient Greek geography, where Asia meant a small region of Anatolia, it becomes surprisingly reasonable. The Sahara's ancient green world would indeed match such a vast and thriving domain. Another striking detail emerges. Plato noted mountains to the north of Atlantis, described as beautiful and tall. North of the Rashad structure, the Adrar Plateau rises like a natural barrier, majestic, wind-carved, and ancient, a landscape that perfectly mirrors the philosopher's account. He also spoke of fertile plains stretching for thousands of stadia. Today, hidden beneath the sands, researchers have found signs of ancient rivers and massive floodplains. What appears barren now was once a thriving region, a cradle of life shaped by water and time. The level of precision in Plato's description is unusual for allegory. He listed distances, measurements, and geological relationships that align uncannily with the Richat. Scholars often dismiss this as coincidence, but coincidence, repeated too many times, begins to look like memory. Of course, not every detail matches perfectly. Some elements appear symbolic, others exaggerated. But that is the nature of ancient storytelling. Messages carried across centuries change, shift, and reshape themselves. What matters is the skeleton beneath the story, the framework that refuses to vanish. Plato's dialogues were written long after the events they describe, yet their tone suggests he believed his sources. He emphasized that the story was strange, yet entirely true. Whether he meant historically true or philosophically true remains debated, but his sincerity is palpable. If Atlantis truly existed, its memory would have been passed from civilization to civilization, like a fading echo. From Egypt to Greece, and perhaps earlier still, from survivors who witnessed its downfall. A real event refracted through myth, becoming legend over time. Plato wrote that Atlantis fell because its people became morally corrupt. This mirrors countless ancient stories of civilizations punished for hubris. Whether literal or symbolic, the message reflects a deep truth. Empires rise, flourish, and fall, often brought down by forces they could never control. Perhaps Atlantis was not a single city, but a memory of a lost age, a time when humanity reached heights forgotten after the great cataclysms, a time erased by flood, fire, and shifting climate, a time whose remnants linger in myths scattered across the world. If so, Plato's coordinates are more than directions on a map. They are clues, breadcrumbs leading us back to an age obscured by sand and time. And in the eye of the Sahara, those clues converge. Geography, geology, myth, and memory, all pointing to one extraordinary possibility. And so, as we trace Plato's words across the ancient world, we begin to see a pattern. A whisper carried across civilizations. A story that refuses to die. Perhaps Atlantis did not vanish beneath the sea, but beneath the sands of Mauritania. And perhaps, just perhaps, the past is far older and far stranger than we imagined. When viewed from the ground, the Sahara seems like an endless canvas of dunes, featureless, silent, and impossibly vast. But from space, a single formation breaks that monotony. A colossal spiral carved into the desert, spanning nearly 40 kilometers. It is known today as the Richat structure, but to many explorers, it carries another name entirely, the Eye of the Sahara. The eye is so massive that early explorers never realized it existed. Only astronauts aboard the Gemini and Apollo missions saw its full shape, an enormous set of concentric rings spiraling outward like ripples frozen in time. To them, it resembled a cosmic fingerprint, a symbol too perfect to ignore, a mystery staring back at humanity from the sands below. Geologists initially classified the eye as a symmetrical dome, a circular uplift shaped by erosion. But symmetrical domes rarely form perfect rings, and they rarely align so closely with ancient myth. The Richat structure raises questions that typical geology cannot easily dismiss. Why is it circular? Why so large? And why does it resemble Plato's Atlantis with almost unnerving accuracy? The outermost ring stretches nearly 23 miles across. Each ring inside grows progressively smaller, forming a geometric pattern reminiscent of human design. And within the center lies a heart-like core, a raised plateau marked by ancient sediment and fractured stone. To some, this is the natural world. To others, it resembles the ruins of a long-forgotten civilization. One of the most striking features is the eye's erosion pattern. It seems to have been shaped not by random wind, but by powerful water flow. Circular canyons and channels radiate outward like streams from a basin. If this land was once submerged, it would create precisely these formations, mirroring the water-filled rings Plato described. Today, the Sahara is bone dry, but geological studies reveal that deep beneath the dunes lie ancient riverbeds, some larger than modern European rivers. These buried waterways form branching networks leading straight toward the Richat structure. And during the African humid period, this entire region was lush, green, and thriving. If the eye once sat at the center of a fertile landscape, its enormous size could support a thriving civilization. The ringed structure would have offered natural defenses, fertile plains, and strategic control over waterways. This raises a simple but powerful question. Is the Richat merely a geological marvel, or the architectural footprint of something far older? The eye's elevation also matches Plato's account. He described the capital of Atlantis as built on a gently rising hill surrounded by circular walls. The Richat's central plateau aligns perfectly with that description, a raised center surrounded by descending terraces, like steps carved by ancient hands. Another detail Plato mentioned was the presence of mountains to the north, which sheltered the city from harsh winds. North of the eye lies the Adrar Plateau, towering cliffs, rugged formations, and natural barriers sculpted by wind and time. This geographic relationship is not vague or symbolic. It is precise. The geological timeline is equally compelling. Some rock samples within the eye date back hundreds of millions of years, but erosion features suggest much more recent shaping, within the time window Plato described. Cataclysmic floods, tectonic uplift, and sudden climate shifts all left their signatures here. One of the greatest debates surrounds the eye's symmetry. Nature creates spirals, folds, and fractures, but concentric rings of this size and uniformity are incredibly rare.
Many researchers admit that while natural forces can create circular structures, the Richat's level of perfection is unusual, almost intentional. Satellite imagery reveals another surprise: radial features that extend outward from the eye, like spokes of a wheel. Some appear to be eroded channels. Others resemble engineered causeways, straight, deliberate, and too aligned to be coincidental. These radiating lines hint at a once connected network. There are also magnetic anomalies. Subtle distortions in Earth's magnetic field have been measured around the eye. Nothing dramatic, but enough to intrigue scientists. Such anomalies can result from ancient impacts or underground structures. Either possibility adds weight to the theory that something extraordinary happened here. Archaeologists exploring the region have discovered stone tools, pottery fragments, and signs of ancient habitation scattered around the eye. None of these finds are advanced, but the Sahara's shifting sands make preservation almost impossible. What survives is only a whisper of what once may have existed. Some explorers argue that if Atlantis existed, its ruins would be either buried or eroded beyond recognition.
And the eye fits that scenario perfectly. A massive structure, weathered by wind, scoured by ancient floods, then consumed by a desert expanding for millennia. Plato described waterways connecting the city to the sea. During the Green Sahara, rivers flowed toward the Atlantic, creating potential trade routes. The eye sits near ancient drainage pathways that once carried water westward, forming natural channels that could serve as maritime corridors. If the Richat structure was once surrounded by water-filled rings, its sheer scale would have been awe-inspiring. Imagine entering the city by ship, passing between towering circular walls, approaching the central island where temples and palaces rose against the horizon. A vision that mirrors Plato's words in remarkable detail. Even the composition of rocks within the eye is intriguing. Some layers contain breccia, rock formed by intense explosive forces. Others contain minerals altered by heat and pressure. These signatures could indicate volcanic activity, or impacts, or even ancient industrial processes long forgotten. Yet despite these clues, mainstream science remains cautious. Most geologists maintain that the eye is a natural formation. They acknowledge its beauty, its symmetry, its mystery, but insist that nature, given enough time, produces wonders beyond imagination. And they may be right. But the Richat structure stands at the crossroads of two possibilities. Either it is one of the most extraordinary geological formations on Earth, or the remains of a civilization older than history, a world erased by flood, memory, and time, yet carved forever into the land. If the eye was Atlantis, its destruction would have been catastrophic. Plato speaks of violent floods and earth-shaking events. Geological evidence suggests that the Sahara underwent massive changes around 12,000 years ago. Floods, climate collapse, and rapid desertification powerful enough to erase an entire culture. Whatever its origin, the eye radiates an undeniable presence. From space, it appears almost alive, like a memory etched into Earth's surface. Whether made by nature, by humanity, or by the forces of a long-lost age, it continues to draw us in, whispering stories that span millennia. Its symmetry, its scale, its geography, all of it aligns with Plato's coordinates in ways that defy simple coincidence. The eye is more than a desert formation. It is a riddle carved into earth, waiting patiently for those willing to look deeper. And so, as we stand before the eye of the Sahara, whether in person or through the gaze of satellites, we confront a profound possibility: that history is far older and far stranger than we ever imagined, and that the truth behind Atlantis may not lie beneath the ocean, but in the heart of the desert. The eye is so massive that early explorers never realized it existed. Only astronauts aboard the Gemini and Apollo missions saw its full shape, an enormous set of concentric rings spiraling outward like ripples frozen in time. To them, it resembled a cosmic fingerprint, assembled too perfect to ignore. Geologists initially classified the eye as a symmetrical dome shaped by erosion. But domes rarely form perfect rings and rarely align so closely with ancient myth. The Richat's design raises questions geology alone struggles to answer. Why so circular? Why so vast? And why so precisely like Plato's Atlantis? The outermost ring stretches nearly 23 miles across. Each inner ring grows progressively smaller, forming a geometric pattern reminiscent of deliberate design. And at its center lies a raised plateau of fractured stone. To some, this is nature. To others, it is the ghost of a vanished civilization. One of the eye's most striking features is its erosion pattern. It appears shaped not by random winds, but by powerful water flow. Circular channels radiate outward like streams escaping a basin. If this land was once submerged, these rings would mirror the canals Plato described. Today, the Sahara is dry, but deep beneath the dunes lie ancient riverbeds, some wider than major European rivers. These buried waterways branch outward, flowing directly toward the Richat. During the African humid period, this region was lush, green, and alive. If the eye once sat in the center of a fertile landscape, it could have supported a thriving civilization. Its circular form offered natural defenses, fertile plains, and strategic access to waterways. This raises an old but powerful question. Is the Richat simply geology or architecture? The eye's elevation matches Plato's description. He wrote of a gently rising hill encircled by rings of land and water. The Richat's central plateau mirrors that shape perfectly, ascending in terraces like steps carved by forgotten hands. Plato also described mountains to the north that sheltered the city from harsh winds. North of the eye lies the Adrar Plateau, towering cliffs, rugged stone, and natural barriers sculpted across ages. Geography, once again, aligns with myth. The geological timeline deepens the mystery. Some rock samples are hundreds of millions of years old, yet erosion patterns suggest a more recent shaping, possibly within the window Plato described. Floods, tectonic uplift, and sudden climate shifts all left their marks here. One debate centers on the eye's symmetry. Nature forms spirals and fractures, but 4 perfect rings stretching miles wide are extremely rare. Many scientists acknowledge the Richat's precision is unusual, even uncanny, almost purposeful. Satellite imagery reveals radial features that extend outward from the eye like wheel spokes. Some resemble eroded channels, others seem straight and deliberate, like engineered causeways. Together, they hint at a once connected network. Magnetic anomalies add another layer of intrigue. Subtle distortions in Earth's magnetic field have been detected near the eye, small but unusual. Such anomalies can result from impacts, volcanic activity, or buried structures. Each possibility fuels deeper questions. Archaeologists have found stone tools, pottery fragments, and signs of ancient habitation around the eye. Nothing advanced survives. The desert erases with brutal efficiency. But scattered remnants suggest the region was once alive with human presence. Some explorers argue that if Atlantis existed, its remains would be buried or eroded beyond recognition. The eye fits this scenario perfectly. A colossal structure weathered by wind, carved by floods, and swallowed by expanding desert for thousands of years. Plato described waterways connecting the city to the sea. During the Green Sahara, rivers flowed westward toward the Atlantic, forming natural trade routes. The eye sits exactly where these ancient channels once converged. If the Richat structure once held water-filled rings, its scale would have been breathtaking. Picture ships gliding between circular canals, approaching a central island crowned with temples and towers, a vision echoing Plato's descriptions with eerie fidelity. The rocks within the eye contain breccia, formed by explosive forces, and minerals shaped by extreme heat and pressure. These signatures could indicate volcanic forces or ancient impacts, or perhaps something human-made, long forgotten. Mainstream geology remains cautious. Many scientists insist the eye is natural, a magnificent but ordinary formation. They marvel at its symmetry and beauty, yet maintain nature alone shaped it over vast spans of time. But the Richat sits at the crossroads of 2 worlds.
Either it is one of Earth's greatest geological wonders, or the eroded skeleton of a civilization lost before recorded history. A world erased by catastrophe and time.
If the eye was Atlantis, its end would have been catastrophic. Plato spoke of violent floods and earth-shattering events. Geological evidence suggests the Sahara endured massive upheaval 12,000 years ago, floods, climate collapse, and sudden desertification. Whatever its origin, the eye radiates a presence impossible to ignore. From orbit, it appears alive, like a memory carved into Earth itself. Whether shaped by nature or by ancient hands, it whispers across millennia. Its symmetry, its scale, its geography, each aligns with Plato's coordinates in ways difficult to dismiss. The eye is more than geology. It is a riddle etched into the desert, waiting for a patient listener. And so, as we stand before the eye of the Sahara, we confront a profound possibility: that history is older, stranger, and more mysterious than we imagine. Perhaps Atlantis never sank into the sea, but into the sands. Tens of thousands of years before the Sahara became a vast desert, it was a living world, green, fertile, and shaped by endless rain. A land filled with rivers, lakes, and grasslands stretching farther than the eye could see. Today, it is hard to imagine this ocean of sand as anything but empty, but the Earth remembers every chapter of its past, even the ones we forget. The story of the Green Sahara begins with Earth's slow wobble, its axial tilt shifting over millennia, pulling rain belts northward. When the monsoon drifted across North Africa, the region transformed from arid wasteland into a thriving ecosystem. Herds of elephants, giraffes, and antelope crossed its plains, while early humans built homes near freshwater lakes the size of small seas. Sediment cores taken from beneath ancient dunes tell a vivid tale. Layers of pollen, freshwater algae, and plant fibers lie buried beneath the desert floor. Each layer is a page from a forgotten book, revealing that the Sahara once hosted sprawling wetlands and dense river systems. It was not a landscape of silence, it was a world alive with sound. Satellite imagery has revealed the ghost outlines of these ancient waterways, massive river channels running hundreds of miles across what is now dry sand. One of the most striking is the Tamanrasset River, a waterway larger than the Nile, which once flowed westward into the Atlantic. It linked distant regions and shaped human migrations long before recorded history. Along these riverbanks, archaeologists have discovered stone tools, hearths, and remains of early settlements. People lived, hunted, and flourished here. This was not a marginal land. It was a cradle of culture, a fertile corridor connecting continents and shaping the movement of early civilizations across Africa. At the heart of this ancient world stood enormous lakes. The largest, known today as Lake Megachad, once spanned an area greater than the size of Germany. Its shorelines supported dense vegetation and vibrant wildlife. Its waters fed streams that reached deep into regions now buried under dunes. These lakes played a role far beyond local ecosystems. They created microclimates, cooling winds, humidity, and storms that shaped patterns across the continent. The Sahara was not simply green. It was balanced, stable, and interconnected, a network of life that rivaled the Serengeti in diversity. Then, about 5,500 years ago, the monsoon began its slow retreat. The air dried. The rains faded. Lakes shrank, and rivers vanished. What had taken millennia to grow unraveled in a geological instant. The Green Sahara began to die, first quietly, then completely. The transformation was not sudden, but relentless. Grasslands gave way to scrub. Scrub gave way to sand, and sand reclaimed everything that once thrived. Civilizations living along the water were forced to move, carrying their knowledge into the Nile Valley, the Maghreb, and beyond. As the desert expanded, it buried the evidence of the world that came before. Villages disappeared beneath dunes. Shorelines vanished beneath layers of dust. and the memory of a once green landscape faded into myth, preserved only in scattered oral traditions. But Earth does not forget. Beneath satellite radar, scientists have mapped ancient riverbeds with remarkable clarity. Some channels stretch thousands of miles. Others form complex deltas, proving that immense volumes of fresh water once flowed through this region. These discoveries challenge our understanding of the Sahara. It was not always a barrier dividing civilizations. At times, it was a bridge, uniting cultures, enabling migrations, and carrying stories and technologies across vast distances. The Green Sahara also raises deeper questions. If humans flourished here, what did they build? What did they leave behind? And how much of that memory was lost when the desert advanced? In an environment where sand can swallow mountains, entire histories can vanish without a trace. Some researchers argue that early human settlements in the Sahara may have been far more developed than previously believed. Evidence of irrigation, animal domestication, and long-distance trade hints at societies more complex than we assume. Much of this remains buried, waiting for the dunes to shift. Even today, nomadic tribes speak of ancient stone walls hidden beneath the sand, of carved rock faces buried in remote valleys, and of long-dried lakes that once supported forests and people. Their stories echo the geologic record with uncanny precision. At the center of this vanished world lies a structure that captures global curiosity, the Richat structure. If the Sahara was once green, then the eye of the Sahara was not a lifeless crater. It was a vantage point overlooking a fertile plain. Its rings would have stood above rivers, lakes, and grasslands. This reshapes our imagination. What if the eye was not isolated in a barren desert, but surrounded by water-rich environments? What if it was once a central hub in a network of settlements? What if its circular terraces were carved not by time, but by hands? Plato described Atlantis as a land of abundant water, lush soil, and natural beauty, features impossible to imagine in the Sahara today. But during the Green Sahara, every detail becomes plausible. The climate, the geography, the fertility, everything aligns. If Atlantis existed during this period, the Sahara would have been the perfect home for it. And its destruction, timed with the onset of sudden aridification, matches Plato's account of catastrophe. Water vanished, land cracked, civilizations collapsed, and memory dissolved into myth. Some scientists propose that the end of the Green Sahara was not only due to gradual climate shifts, but also extreme storms, megafloods, and possible rapid desertification events. These conditions could erase entire cultures within generations. Looking deeper, even the soil composition tells a story. Beneath dunes lie layers of clay, silt, and organic matter, materials that only form in wetlands. Their presence proves the desert was once rich, alive, and capable of sustaining large populations. Imagining the Sahara as green is not fantasy. It is scientific reality. Its rivers carved valleys still visible from space. Its lakes shaped landscapes still traced by geologists. Its ecosystems supported megafauna that vanished only when the climate turned. This world was not peripheral to human history. It was central. The Sahara shaped migrations, cultures, and myths across Africa and the Mediterranean. Its transformation reshaped humanity as civilizations were forced to search for new homes. Perhaps this is the true mystery, not that the Sahara was once green, but how easily we forget. Landscapes change, rivers move, life shifts. What we see today is only a snapshot. Beneath the sand lies an entire lost chapter of human history. The Green Sahara reminds us that the Earth is always in motion, breathing, shifting, creating, and erasing worlds. Civilizations rise in one climate and vanish in the next. What exists today may disappear tomorrow, and what vanished long ago may still sleep beneath the dunes.
And as we return to the story of Atlantis, the Green Sahara becomes more than context. It becomes possibility, a reminder that worlds can flourish where deserts now stand.
And that the truth of our past may lie buried, not beneath oceans, but beneath sand. Across the Sahara's vast expanse, beyond dunes that swallow light and silence entire horizons, fragments of humanity persist, small, fragile, and nearly erased. These traces appear where no one expects them, in remote plateaus, weathered cliffs, and now buried valleys. If Atlantis existed in this region, these subtle clues, scattered like breadcrumbs across deep time, may be all that remain of a forgotten world. Archaeologists studying the Sahara often describe it as a graveyard of civilizations. Not because ruins fill the sands, but because the desert hides them too well. Wind, heat, and shifting dunes devour nearly everything. Yet here and there, stone tools, pottery shards, and strange engravings surface, just long enough to remind us that this land once lived. One of the strongest indicators of ancient human presence comes in the form of lithic scatter, clusters of stone tools stretching across areas where rivers once flowed. These tools are sophisticated, shaped with intention, and often made from materials not native to the immediate region. This suggests movement, trade, or organized crafting long before recorded history. Some tools exhibit a workmanship comparable to late Neolithic societies, though many are older, far older. Their creators possessed an understanding of leverage, blade geometry, and tool economy. They were not primitive wanderers. They were artisans of survival, living in a landscape far greener and richer than the one we see today. Near certain dry river valleys, archaeologists have found hearth structures, rings of stone arranged deliberately, containing charcoal layers preserved beneath ancient sediment. Radiocarbon analysis places some of these hearths deep into the humid periods of the Sahara, aligning perfectly with eras when sustained civilizations could thrive. Pottery fragments found across Mauritania and Mali reveal functional design and aesthetic patterns. Some carry parallel line engravings, others show cross-hatching techniques remarkably similar to coastal North African cultures. Whether by migration, trade, or shared ancestry, the people of the Sahara were not isolated. But the most intriguing discoveries are the stone alignments, standing stones arranged deliberately across plateaus. These megalithic markers resemble proto-observatories, with certain configurations aligning with solstices. Although modest compared to Stonehenge, they point to an early understanding of astronomy. North of the Richat structure, in the Adrar region, several rock formations appear almost architectural, flat slabs balanced atop one another, lintel-like stones bridging gaps, and stacked walls that resist the narrative of random collapse. While natural explanations exist, some formations feel eerily intentional. Petroglyphs found in these regions depict giraffes, cattle, rivers, boats, and human figures. The sheer variety suggests a thriving cultural world. Among them are scenes featuring circular enclosures, concentric paddocks, and what may resemble ringed settlements. Scientists consider them symbolic, but to storytellers they hint at memory. Some engravings show large animals, now extinct in the Sahara. Others portray human gatherings, processions, and perhaps rituals. These images reveal a society that valued recording, expressing, and myth-making. The Sahara was a canvas where early humans painted their identity. The geology also hides clues. Beneath layers of crusted sand, geologists have discovered ancient quarries where stones were extracted with patterned fractures. These fractures follow predictable angles, consistent with quarrying rather than natural splitting. Someone, long ago, harvested stone here. Near the Richat, certain boulders appear cut, clean, straight, and at times polished by wind over millennia. While many of these features can arise through natural processes, the concentration around alleged habitation zones raises questions. Some scientists argue that humans never settled permanently in the Central Sahara during the humid periods, but the evidence contradicts this. Fish remains, hearth ash, and domestic animal bones show prolonged habitation.
Humans not only passed through, they stayed, built, lived. There are also anomalies, spheres of hardened clay, perfectly rounded, fragments of unknown composite materials, and stone fragments with parallel scoring lines. These findings often receive little attention because they challenge comfortable narratives. Beneath certain dunes, ground-penetrating radar has revealed structures, rectilinear shapes, consistent spacing, and grid patterns suggestive of foundations. Without excavation, interpretation is limited, but the patterns persist across multiple scans. The most controversial anomaly is found near the southern ring of the Richat. Some explorers documented stone platforms arranged in arcs, too geometric to be random.
Critics dismiss them as erosion remnants, yet the arcs mirror the curvature of the larger structure with uncanny precision. These features raise a profound question. Could the Richat have once been a focal point of human organization? Whether ceremonial, administrative, or residential, its unique geometry would naturally draw settlement patterns around it. Studies of ancient lake shores nearby reveal smoothed rock surfaces, consistent with long-term human activity, such as grinding or preparation zones. These surfaces lie several meters below current dunes, preserved only by layers of sand and time. The presence of polished stone scrapers and bone tools near these sites suggests food processing or crafting activities. If the Sahara once supported agriculture or proto-agriculture, these tools may be evidence of early innovation. Some remnants suggest the presence of structures built from organic materials, mud brick, wood, or reed. These materials decay rapidly in exposed environments, but may fossilize when buried. Geophysical surveys hint at repeating rectangular signatures beneath dunes, supporting this hypothesis. Another anomaly lies in the distribution of obsidian tools found far from volcanic sources. This indicates expansive trade networks or long-range expeditions. A civilization capable of such movement would possess knowledge, coordination, and purpose. As the climate shifted and lakes receded, migration routes became essential. Rock art panels show human caravans, animals in single-file lines, and boats on rivers, scenes that imply organized movement and adaptation through changing environments. Curiously, several petroglyphs depict objects resembling stars or concentric circles above settlements. While often dismissed as symbolic or ritualistic, these recurring motifs echo the circular architecture theorized for ancient ringed cities. Some explorers believe these circular motifs are literal memories, recordings of true landscapes that existed during the Green Sahara. Others argue they represent cosmology or spiritual beliefs. The ambiguity keeps the mystery alive. Further anomalies emerge from stories of nomadic tribes. They speak of cities swallowed by sand, of old walls revealed after storms, and of paths that once led to water. Oral histories preserve details often ignored by mainstream academia, but sometimes confirmable through satellite imagery. One tribe recounts discovering a stone ring formation after a great dune shifted. When they returned months later, the formation was gone, buried once more. If such rings exist across the region, the desert may be preserving ancient structures in a shifting cycle of concealment and revelation. Even buried river deltas contain human fingerprints. Excavations uncovered fish bones and net weights, proof of fishing communities where no water has flowed for thousands of years. People adapted to every phase of the Sahara's changing identity. Stratigraphic studies reveal burnt layers, consistent with ancient wildfires or possibly human-set fires used for land clearing. These layers mark episodic periods of intense activity. Some anomalies challenge scientific explanation entirely. Geometric rock patterns, repeating triangular arrangements, and enormous boulders stacked as though intentionally placed. Natural? Possibly. Intentional? Equally possible. When viewed collectively, not individually, these fragments, anomalies, and traces paint a picture of a region alive with human ingenuity. The Sahara was not empty. It was a world of experimentation, adaptation, and perhaps even early urbanization. If Atlantis lived and died here, its remnants would resemble exactly this: scattered evidence lacking clear context, erased by climate collapse, and half-preserved by layers of sand moved by winds older than memory. Understanding the Sahara requires humility. We study only what the desert allows us to see. What lies beneath the next dune may rewrite everything we believe about ancient civilizations and their capabilities. The combination of human traces, anomalous structures, and shifting geologies leaves open the possibility of a forgotten society, one advanced enough to leave an imprint, yet vulnerable enough to be erased. Future technology, LiDAR, deep radar, high-resolution satellite imaging, promises revelations. Already, researchers are discussing the possibility of mapping the Sahara as thoroughly as the Amazon. If they succeed, new chapters will emerge from beneath the sand. But for now, we walk blind across a land holding secrets older than history. Every dune holds potential. Every rocky outcrop may be a clue. Every fragment may belong to a story spanning millennia. The Sahara's anomalies remind us of one truth: vanished worlds leave echoes. And sometimes, those echoes lead us back to places like the Eye of the Sahara, where memory, geology, and possibility meet. Perhaps Atlantis is not a myth, but a whisper waiting to be heard again. Across continents, separated by oceans, languages, and time, ancient cultures tell stories that feel uncannily alike. Tales of a world before ours, of floods that ended civilizations, of skyborne visitors, of gods who walked the earth. These myths do not simply entertain, they preserve fragments of memory. And when placed side by side, they form a mosaic that hints at a shared prehistoric experience. In Greece, Plato spoke of Atlantis, a mighty island nation destroyed in a single day and night. But in Mesopotamia, thousands of miles away, the Epic of Gilgamesh recounts a similar deluge that erased humanity's first cities. The Sumerians called their lost age the time before the flood, a phrase echoed across many ancient tongues. In the Hebrew tradition, the book of Genesis describes a world cleansed by waters, with Noah instructed to build a vessel and preserve life. In India, the Matsya Purana tells of Manu, forewarned by a divine being to survive a cosmological flood. Different lands, different cultures, same memory of catastrophe. What is striking is not simply the presence of flood myths, it is the precision shared among them. A sudden rise of waters, a warning, a chosen survivor, a destroyed civilization, a rebirth. These patterns suggest an event so powerful, so traumatic, it etched itself deep into the collective human psyche. In Egypt, ancient texts speak of Zep Tepi, the first time, an age when gods ruled alongside humans before calamity reshaped the world. For some scholars, Zep Tepi mirrors the concept of a prehistoric golden age. For others, it suggests cultural memory of an advanced, now vanished society. In the Andes, the Inca told of Viracocha, a bearded teacher deity who emerged after a devastating flood to rebuild civilization. He instructed the survivors, taught architecture, astronomy, and moral codes, then vanished across the sea, mirroring gods from other continents with striking similarity. Among Native American tribes, from the Hopi to the Mandan, stories describe previous worlds destroyed by water or fire. Humanity, according to these traditions, emerges from refuges, underground caverns, mountains, or divine vessels. The world we inhabit is merely the latest in a long cycle. In Polynesia, across island chains thousands of miles apart, myths speak of great cities swallowed by the ocean. Oral histories reference sunken kingdoms, stone temples beneath waves, and ancestors fleeing rising seas. These stories echo across the Pacific like faint signals from a bygone age. The Yoruba of West Africa speak of Ife as the birthplace of civilization, an origin story where divine beings shaped land from primordial waters. In this tradition, the world began with a descent from the heavens and the creation of order from chaos,
a theme mirrored across Asia, Europe, and the Americas. Why do so many myths begin with a flood? Why do cultures separated by oceans share the same archetypes? Psychologists often interpret these parallels as universal fears: death, rebirth, renewal. But another possibility exists. These myths record real ancient events remembered through generations. Many scholars believe that around the end of the last ice age, rising seas submerged vast coastal settlements. Since early humans lived near water, it is likely that countless communities vanished beneath waves. Their stories, retold by survivors, may have formed the bedrock of global myths. But myths contain more than floods. They hold clues about technology, architecture, and cosmic knowledge. The Dogon people of Mali describe star systems invisible to the naked eye, knowledge they claim was given by sky-born teachers. Their stories of the Nomo parallel Sumerian tales of the Anunnaki. In Sumer, the Anunnaki were described as godlike figures who descended from the heavens to shape early civilizations. Their arrival is linked to agriculture, kingship, and celestial knowledge. These stories, dismissed by modern scholarship as symbolic, nevertheless align with patterns found worldwide. Across the Mediterranean, Phoenician and Minoan myths speak of cities built in concentric rings: one ring of land, then water, then land again. This structure resembles Plato's Atlantis and unexpectedly mirrors the Richat structure's layout. Myth and geography intersect in strange ways. The Celts tell of Tir na Nog, a western land across the sea filled with beauty and immortality. Some versions describe it sinking or becoming inaccessible after a great transformation. Even in northern Europe, the memory of a vanished western realm persists. In Southeast Asia, the tales of Mu and Lemuria speak of vast continents swallowed by water.
While these places remain unconfirmed, the stories preserve memories of rising seas and shifting lands, consistent with dramatic sea level rise following the last glacial melt. Australian Aboriginal traditions, among the oldest on Earth, contain oral histories accurately describing coastlines that existed 10,000 years ago. Their stories recount floods, rising waters, and lost territories, proof that human memory can survive in myth for millennia. Across all these cultures, one concept appears repeatedly: a world before ours, advanced in ways that seem beyond the capabilities of prehistoric societies. These civilizations fell not from war or decay, but from cataclysm, flood, fire, ice, or celestial wrath. Myths often speak of beings, gods, demigods, culture bringers, arriving in radiant vessels or descending from the sky. While symbolic, these accounts share motifs with global stories of sky chariots, shining disks, or fiery craft. Ancient people used mythic language to describe phenomena they could not explain. Even the architecture in myths echoes one another. Towers that reach the heavens, circular temples aligned with stars, pillar cities rising from water all appear across continents. These shared motifs suggest either ancient cultural diffusion or a deeper, older memory. In many traditions, humanity itself is cyclical. The Maya believed the world had undergone multiple creations and destructions. Hindu cosmology describes yugas, ages of rise and decline. Greek philosophers wrote of repeating cycles of catastrophe. The idea that civilization resets is not modern, it is ancient. Some myths describe the ocean withdrawing before disaster. Others speak of fire raining from the sky. Some mention a loud roar before the flood. These details align with geological signatures: mega tsunamis, impacts, and sudden ice sheet collapses. Myth may be the human interpretation of real cataclysm. What if global myths do not represent imagination, but data encoded into story form? In pre-literate societies, narrative was the storage system of knowledge. People preserved astronomy, geography, and history not in books, but in tales passed from generation to generation. If we approach myth as ancient memory, then the similarities across continents become remarkable. Cultures far apart recall a world before ours, its destruction, and a rebirth. They remember teachers, builders, and survivors. The echoes of a single event ripple through different languages. The question becomes, did a real global catastrophe imprint itself on the world strongly enough that nearly every culture remembered it? The Younger Dryas, with its sudden global freeze and rapid sea level rise, fits perfectly into the mythic timelines of world floods. Even the placement of lost lands overlaps. The Greeks locate Atlantis to the west. Celtic lore speaks of western realms. Polynesian myths whisper of sunken cities. Indigenous Americans tell of eastern lands swallowed by water. Different continents, same direction. Astronomical alignments in myths, star visitors, celestial warnings, glowing objects, could reflect real astronomical events. A comet breaking apart in the sky would appear as gods descending, light streaking, or fiery serpents. Ancient eyes described cosmic chaos in poetic terms. These myths also reflect moral lessons. Civilizations grow proud, turn corrupt, forget humility, and are punished by nature or gods. Whether literal or symbolic, these narratives convey a truth. Advanced societies are fragile in the face of climatic collapse. Some linguists propose that remnants of a proto-mythic tradition may have spread during early human migrations. As people traveled across continents, they carried stories that evolved but retained core structures. These ancestral myths may be humanity's oldest surviving literature. If Atlantis truly existed, its legacy would live not in stone, because stone can be lost to sand and sea, but in myth. Surviving refugees could have carried fragments of their culture into Egypt, Greece, Mesopotamia, and beyond. Each region retold the story in its own voice. Global myth connections do not prove Atlantis, but they form a compelling framework. If so many cultures recall a lost world destroyed by catastrophe, perhaps they remember the same event, each from a different angle. A shattered mirror still reflects its original form. When we lay these myths side by side, they align like constellations. Floods, sky gods, ringed cities, cycles of destruction, all pointing toward an ancestral story older than writing. A story of a world erased, yet never forgotten. In this sense, Atlantis may not be a single city, but a symbol, representing all lost civilizations swallowed by time. Every flood myth, every sunk continent, every vanished kingdom may be another face of the same ancient truth. And yet, mythology also preserves hope. After every destruction comes rebirth. Survivors rebuild. Knowledge is carried forward. Humanity endures. Our stories survive because our ancestors refused to let memory die. When we listen to global myths with patience, we hear not fantasy, but testimony. They describe landscapes reshaped by water, skies streaked with fire, and cities that vanished in a day. These stories may hold the final keys to understanding the world before ours. And so, Part 6 leaves us with a question. What if the myths of flood, fire, and fallen kingdoms are not separate stories, but one? A unified memory of a civilization older than history, destroyed by cataclysm and preserved in whispers across every culture on Earth. If the Eye of the Sahara truly held the memory of Atlantis, then we must ask a difficult question. What kind of society could have thrived here? Not a mythical empire of impossible technology, but a real culture shaped by the green Saharas, rivers, fertile basins, and shifting climate. To imagine Atlantis here is to imagine a civilization rooted in nature yet elevated by innovation. Plato describes Atlantis as a place of careful planning, a society that blended engineering with symbolism. If such a culture existed in the Sahara, its concentric layout could represent both practical design and cosmological meaning. A city of rings could manage water, separate districts, and reflect a worldview built on cycles, order, and harmony between humans and the land. The green Sahara would have offered the perfect foundation for an early complex society. Abundant freshwater lakes supported agriculture, while grasslands sustained herds of cattle and wildlife. A civilization emerging here could develop far earlier than those that rose along the Nile or the Tigris.
Rich soil, stable climates, and predictable rains form the backbone of every ancient urban world. If Atlantis existed here, its citizens might have farmed cereals, raised livestock, and practiced early irrigation. They would have mastered seasonal cycles, adapting to wet and dry periods with ingenuity. Their knowledge would not resemble modern engineering, but it could have included terracing, water storage, and crop management, technologies crucial for survival. Trade would be central to such a society. The Sahara's ancient river systems connected distant regions, enabling the movement of obsidian, copper, gold, and shells. Evidence of prehistoric trade across Africa already exists.
A ringed city at the Rishat could have served as a hub in a network stretching toward the Maghreb, the Sahel, and possibly even Atlantic shores during wetter periods. The architecture of this hypothetical Atlantis does not need to be extravagant. Simple stone foundations, wooden upper structures, and clay complexes similar to early Nile settlements would be enough to support a thriving population. Over time, sand, erosion, and climate decay could erase these materials entirely, leaving behind only ambiguous traces. Plato speaks of temples decorated with metals and carvings. While symbolic, the region's geology supports the idea of mineral wealth. Copper, iron, and quartzite appear in abundance. A society here might have developed metalworking traditions and ceremonial centers that reflected their spiritual beliefs. If Atlantis was real, it would not have been a utopia. Like all early civilizations, it likely wrestled with environmental pressures. As rainfall patterns shifted, rivers would shrink and lakes would fluctuate dramatically. These changes could force innovations in farming, migration, and territorial management. Socially, Atlantis might resemble other proto-urban cultures: a central authority, skilled artisans, farmers, traders, and priests. Circular city planning often reflects hierarchical organization: elites in the center, commoners outward. This layout appears in ancient Malta, the Andes, and even some African settlements. Philosophically, such a culture might blend astronomy with spirituality. Many ancient societies aligned structures with the stars, viewing celestial cycles as divine rhythms. A ringed city could represent the cosmos itself, each band a symbolic orbit. The Rishat structure's shape lends itself naturally to this interpretation. Technologically, an Atlantean society would not require futuristic machines. Early engineering, canals, reservoirs, stone cutting, quarrying, granaries could produce stability and longevity. Some features around the Rishat hint at ancient quarrying or shaping, though evidence remains inconclusive. A maritime empire is possible without oceans. Megalakes and river corridors would create inland navigation networks that function like seas. Boats could transport goods, people, and stories across vast distances. The idea that Atlantis was a seafaring culture aligns with this prehistoric geography. The collapse of such a society would likely stem from environmental shock. As the green Sahara shifted into desert, water sources dried, and arable land vanished. Agriculture would fail, trade routes would collapse, famine and migration would follow. If a mega flood event struck during this period, the destruction could be near total. The circular design that once protected the city might channel destructive water flows. Floods could sweep away structures, drown districts, and leave little trace of what once stood there. Survivors would scatter to more stable regions, north to the Mediterranean, east to the Nile, or south along remaining rivers. In each place, they might bring fragments of memory, origin myths, and knowledge passed down through stories rather than ruins. Such diffusion could explain similarities between Egyptian cosmology, Berber legends, and Greek accounts. A forgotten culture could leave an imprint without leaving monuments. Ideas travel farther than stone. If Atlantis existed here, it might have served as a cultural seed, one of many prehistoric societies that contributed to later civilizations. Early mathematics, hydrology, astronomy, and agricultural practices could have their origins in such a vanished world. Urban life would foster myths, rituals, and artistic expression. Petroglyphs depicting concentric shapes, celestial events, or ceremonial scenes align with the possibility of symbolic storytelling.
Even if not Atlantean, they point to cultural sophistication. The loss of this society would be traumatic. Myths of floods, fallen cities, and divine punishment may originate from real memories of ecological catastrophe. Plato's account may be one version of a story shared across continents. Critics argue that Atlantis is fiction, yet they overlook a key point. Plato embedded real geographical clues, real measurements, and a real timeline that matches the younger Dryas. If this was pure fiction, why anchor it so precisely in historical context? The Richat structure aligns with nearly every physical detail Plato described. This does not confirm Atlantis, but it elevates the possibility beyond speculation. It invites a serious look at prehistory, at what lies beneath the sand and what stories survive in myth. If this was Atlantis, it represents not supernatural grandeur, but human ingenuity. A society adapting to dramatic climate shifts, building with the landscape, and shaping identity through geometry and ritual.
A culture advanced for its time, yet vulnerable to forces it could not control. Imagining Atlantis in the Sahara is not an act of fantasy, it is an exploration of what early civilizations could achieve under favorable conditions. It challenges our assumptions about linear progress and invites us to consider forgotten chapters of humanity. In the end, the question is not whether Atlantis was real, but whether the world once held societies we no longer remember. If the Richat structure was one of them, its ruins are gone, but its echo may survive in the stories that outlived it. As compelling as the Atlantis-Richat hypothesis may seem, scientific discourse requires restraint, discipline, and skepticism. The Sahara is a vast geological canvas shaped by forces older than humanity itself. Before accepting extraordinary claims, we must examine what mainstream geology, archaeology, and climatology tell us. This part is not meant to debunk wonder, but to ground it, to create the balance every serious documentary must uphold. Most geologists classify the Richat structure as a deeply eroded igneous dome, formed by magma pushing upward beneath Earth's crust. Over millions of years, layers of sedimentary rock eroded at different rates, creating concentric patterns. To them, this geometry is not a blueprint of civilization, but a natural consequence of uplift and erosion. One key argument is scale. The Richat spans roughly 40 kilometers, far larger than any known ancient city. Even mighty civilizations like the Egyptians or Minoans built cities only a fraction of that size. Critics argue it is unrealistic to imagine a prehistoric society engineering an urban space so colossal without leaving unmistakable structural evidence. Geologists also highlight that the Richat's rock layers are millions of years old, far older than any human civilization. The oldest rocks in the structure date back more than 100 million years, formed during ancient marine eras. This timeline seems fundamentally incompatible with the idea of human construction. Another counterargument concerns the absence of artifacts. While stone tools and pottery are found across the Sahara, none have been discovered within the central Richat Basin itself. Without tools, foundations, or remains, many scientists argue there is no indication of long-term settlement. Archaeologists note that civilizations of Atlantis' described complexity, maritime empires, monumental architecture, leave durable traces, ceramics, infrastructure, burial sites, metal fragments. In the Richat area, such items are conspicuously scarce. Critics interpret this silence as strong evidence against advanced habitation. Satellite imagery often reveals rectangular patterns near the Richat, but experts caution that pattern recognition can mislead. Humans instinctively perceive order in randomness. Geological fracturing, wind erosion, and desert varnish can mimic artificial lines, producing false positives. Another scientific pushback targets the circular shape itself. Concentric formations occur naturally: volcanic calderas, impact craters, intrusive domes. The Richat fits several geological models without invoking human involvement. To specialists, its symmetry is impressive, but not unprecedented. Hydrologists add that Plato's rings of land and water do not match known hydrological features here. While the area once held rivers and lakes, no concrete evidence suggests artificial canals or moats. Critics emphasize that matching Plato's description to the Rishat may be too interpretive. Mainstream historians argue that Plato likely invented Atlantis as a moral allegory. Within Timaeus and Critias, Atlantis serves as a philosophical device, a warning against arrogance, echoing Athens' conflict with imperial powers. In this reading, geographical precision is secondary to narrative purpose. Classicists also stress that Plato's dialogues blend myth, memory, and metaphor. He references ancient Egypt, but without archaeological confirmation. For scholars of Greek literature, the story's symbolic structure outweighs its historical claims. Then there is the issue of population. Plato describes a large, organized, militaristic society. Anthropologists argue no evidence exists of such massive populations in the Sahara 12,000 years ago. The region's known inhabitants were small, mobile groups, not urban networks. Radiocarbon dating poses another challenge. So far, no datable material from the Rishat indicates human activity during the time frame Plato describes. Without bones, charcoal, or organic remnants, archaeologists cannot place humans at the site conclusively. Geomorphologists argue that the Rishat's erosion patterns show long-term exposure, not the rapid destructive event Plato describes. They maintain that while megafloods occurred across the world, no direct evidence ties them specifically to this formation. Climate specialists highlight that the Sahara's wet and dry cycles are periodic. While catastrophic changes occurred, they did not necessarily align with human-built infrastructure. Natural climate oscillations can explain the Sahara's transformation without invoking a lost civilization. Seismologists doubt the impact hypothesis often used to justify Atlantis's destruction. While Younger Dryas impact evidence exists elsewhere, no crater or shock pattern is associated with the Richat. For them, the idea that a cosmic event destroyed a Saharan civilization is unsubstantiated. Linguists offer pushback too. If a prehistoric empire existed here, traces might appear in Berber, Egyptian, or Sahelian languages. Yet no shared linguistic substrate indicates a vanished superculture. The languages instead reflect gradual, regional development. Anthropologists caution that projecting advanced civilization onto prehistoric societies can distort our understanding. Many cultures were highly sophisticated in adaptation, spirituality, and survival, without cities or monumental architecture. Complexity does not always equal urbanization. Archaeologists argue that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Without clear, replicable findings, walls, foundations, inscriptions, the Richat cannot be accepted as Atlantis within scientific standards. Hypotheses must withstand peer review, not just public fascination. But science also acknowledges uncertainty. The Sahara remains vastly unexplored. Over 95% of its subsurface features remain unmapped. Shifting dunes conceal valleys, deltas, and potential archaeological layers. Critics agree that much remains hidden, perhaps for centuries. Still, scientific method demands caution. Similarities between myth and landscape may be coincidental. Pattern matching can lead to confirmation bias where evidence is interpreted to fit a desired narrative. Researchers emphasize the need for detached analysis. Classical scholars remind us that Plato was not a historian. His work mirrors tragic structure, symbolic moralism, and philosophical thought experiments. Assuming he transmitted literal history stretches the intent of his writing beyond academic consensus. Geologists emphasize deep time. The Richat's Echers formed millions of years before humans existed. Sedimentary rings, breccia cores, and intrusive rock layers cannot be attributed to Neolithic engineering. To them, the chronological mismatch is definitive. Archaeologists argue that even if advanced humans lived here, they would still leave recognizable cultural material.
tools, burials, metallurgy, ceramics. The absence of these elements is a strong negative indicator, though not absolute proof, since deserts erase. Hydrologists highlight that ancient waterways near the Richat do not form the clean, circular moats Plato describes. Instead, they reflect natural drainage shaped by rainfall and subsurface geology. Matching them to Atlantis may involve cherry-picking features. Paleoclimatologists point out that the Sahara's wettest periods do not align perfectly with Plato's timeline. Some humid phases occurred earlier or later, raising questions about the area's habitability during the exact period described in Critias. Even proponents of Richat as Atlantis admit that no writing, symbolic artifact, or cultural identity has been found here. Without such evidence, reconstructing a society remains speculative. In science, absence of evidence is not proof, but it narrows possibilities. Skeptics argue that interest in the Richat is driven partly by modern fascination with lost civilizations. Human imagination gravitates towards symmetry, mystery, and narrative coherence. The Richat offers all three, making it easy to overinterpret. Some researchers warn against the Atlantis trap, assuming that any unexplained ancient feature must belong to a lost advanced culture. This mindset can overshadow real archaeological discoveries and undervalue indigenous histories. Yet scientific skepticism is not the enemy of curiosity. It is its foundation. Counterarguments do not exist to silence wonder, but to refine it. They shape better questions, better methods, and more honest interpretations of the past. Balanced inquiry acknowledges both possibilities and limitations. The Richat might be a geological marvel with no human connection, or it might contain traces of forgotten societies that await discovery. Science can challenge speculation, but it cannot dismiss what it has not yet explored. Even the most cautious researchers agree. The Sahara holds secrets. Climate shifts buried entire ecosystems. If humans lived here, evidence may lie meters below the sand. The lack of excavation means we cannot draw firm conclusions.
A responsible documentary recognizes uncertainty. It presents claims, evaluates evidence, and respects the scientific process. The goal is not to declare Atlantis found, but to explore why the question matters and what it reveals about our desire to understand origins. The Richat structure stands at the crossroads of myth and geology. It inspires awe because it mirrors human stories, yet it resists interpretation through those stories alone. Its beauty lies not in answers, but in the tension between them. 3. Ultimately, scientific counterarguments remind us that history is not built from wishful thinking. It is built from evidence. But they also remind us that the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, a paradox that leaves the door open, if only slightly. And so, Part 8 concludes not with certainty, but with humility. The Richat may not be Atlantis. It may be nothing more than an extraordinary geological formation. But until the sands yield their full story, the possibility, however small, remains alive. When all arguments are presented, all evidence weighed, all doubts acknowledged, one truth remains. The Richat structure is one of the most enigmatic formations on Earth. Whether born of geology or memory, it stands like a fossil of some forgotten pattern, too perfect to ignore, too ambiguous to fully claim. And in that tension lies a possibility that refuses to disappear. Humanity has always been shaped by its landscapes, but the landscapes that matter most are often the ones we cannot fully explain. Some inspire science, others inspire myth. The eye of the Sahara does both. It challenges our certainty while awakening something older, our instinct to wonder, to question, to look beyond the immediate. Perhaps the reason the Richat structure has captured global imagination is not because it proves Atlantis, but because it mirrors the silhouette of a story we somehow all remember. A circular city, a golden age, a sudden annihilation. Even if the story is symbolic, its shape resonates deeply with our shared human psyche.
Standing at the edge of the Richat, one confronts scale. 40 kilometers of rings carved through time. No city today resembles it. No known culture built with such geometry. Yet something about its form feels intentional, as though the land itself holds a memory older than its rocks. Science tells us that geology sculpted these rings. Myth tells us that a civilization could once have thrived here.
Reality may lie somewhere between. The Sahara was not always empty. The people who lived here were inventive, adaptive, and capable of shaping their world in ways we underestimate. Even if the Richat was never Atlantis, the Sahara almost certainly witnessed societies we have not yet discovered. The desert is a vast archive, one that hides its documents beneath dunes that shift like tides. Until we excavate deeply, we cannot know how much history remains buried. Thousands of prehistoric settlements have already been found along former lakes and rivers, just hints of an enormous world erased by climate collapse. If so much survived in random fragments, how much more might lie beneath the sand, untouched, unseen, waiting? What makes the Richat compelling is not certainty, but potential. It sits at the convergence of geology, archaeology, climate science, anthropology, and mythology. Few sites on Earth touch so many disciplines at once. Each perspective reveals a different layer, a different interpretation. From geology, we learn deep time. From archaeology, we learn human resilience. From climate science, we learn how worlds rise and fall. And from myth, we learn how trauma becomes story, and story becomes memory. The Richat structure is where these narratives overlap. Atlantis itself may not be a single place. It may be an archetype, an echo of all fallen civilizations compressed into one myth. The Richat could be one of many inspirations, or it could be unique. But myth does not arise without seed. Something real once happened to inspire these tales. When Plato described Atlantis, he anchored it in precise geography, specific measurements, and an exact timeline that astonishingly aligns with the Younger Dryas. Even skeptics admit this level of detail is unusual for metaphor. The Richat is the only known structure that mirrors his description at macro scale. Still, a matching shape does not prove an identity. The structure could simply resemble Atlantis by coincidence. Nature often creates patterns that mimic intention. But coincidence does not erase curiosity. It sharpens it, giving researchers reason to explore further. Many scientists argue that only formal excavation can resolve the mystery. Yet political and environmental obstacles make excavation difficult. The region is remote, the heat extreme, the dunes unpredictable. Until technology advances, much of the Richat will remain out of reach.
Ground-penetrating radar, satellite imaging, and geomagnetic surveys will one day map the Sahara as thoroughly as the Amazon. When that day comes, we may discover not only whether the Richat was inhabited, but what other worlds once existed here: cities, river harbors, agricultural hubs. Climate models suggest that the Sahara could become green again thousands of years from now, just as it was in the past. This cyclical transformation adds another layer to the mystery. Civilizations may rise and fall with these cycles, leaving intermittent traces across millennia. In that sense, Atlantis, whether real or symbolic, represents a warning. Civilizations depend on climate. When climate changes faster than culture can adapt, collapse follows. The Sahara is a monument to this truth, a canvas painted by the planet's shifting breath. Perhaps the Richat reminds us that humanity has lived through dramatic upheavals before. Entire ecosystems vanished. Rivers shifted. Coastlines drowned. People migrated across continents. Their knowledge evolved, fragmented, or disappeared entirely. Our own modern era is not immune to the same forces. The possibility of Atlantis forces us to reconsider the scale of human history. We assume civilization began around 6,000 years ago, but evidence increasingly suggests earlier complexity: Göbekli Tepe, ancient Saharan art, global flood narratives. What if our timeline is incomplete?
If advanced societies existed before known history, their remains would be fragile. Climate collapse, tectonic change, erosion, and rising seas erase far more than stone can preserve. We may be missing entire chapters simply because time is not kind to architecture. The reshot structure may be a geological dome, or it may hide relics we have not yet found. Even if it is geological, it could have served as a settlement site because of its natural terraces, stable central plateau, and access to water during the Green Sahara. Some explorers have noted unusual stone arrangements around the structure. While these formations have plausible natural explanations, the sheer number of anomalies fuels debate. Human pattern recognition can mislead, but it can also guide discovery. If traces of an ancient society lie here, they may be subtle: pigments, hearth ash, carved stone, or buried foundations. Such clues require delicate excavation and interdisciplinary effort. Until then, speculation fills the void. Yet speculation is not unscientific.
It is the first step of every investigation. Curiosity precedes discovery. Hypothesis precedes evidence. Long before archaeologists traced the Nile's ancient course or uncovered Troy, people believed the impossible. Some stories proved true. Atlantis may never be confirmed, but its power lies not in certainty. It lies in its capacity to inspire research, imagination, and interdisciplinary dialogue. The Richat structure, in this light, becomes a catalyst rather than a conclusion. What makes the Richat different from other candidates is its geography. Located just beyond the Pillars of Hercules, matching the timeline, fitting the ringed description, embedded in a region that once thrived with life. If it is not Atlantis, it is still extraordinary. The Sahara holds worlds within worlds, fossil rivers as wide as the Mississippi, lakes the size of seas, stone tools scattered across former shorelines, ancient quarries buried under dunes. Evidence of human presence continuously emerges, reshaping what we know. Perhaps one day we will uncover inscriptions, tools, or foundations near the Richat that definitively prove human settlement. Or perhaps we will discover nothing but wind-carved stone. Either outcome deepens the mystery rather than diminishes it. The beauty of the unknown is that it keeps us honest. It forces us to balance imagination with discipline. It reminds us that science and myth are not enemies. They are partners in the search for meaning. One asks how, the other asks why. If Atlantis existed, it was not a utopia. It was human, vulnerable to nature, shaped by climate, undone by forces beyond its control. That story resonates today more than ever. We too live in an age of rising seas and shifting climates. In this sense, Atlantis is not just a memory of the past, it is a mirror for the present, a symbol of how fragile civilization can be when faced with environmental upheaval. It reminds us that stability is temporary and history is cyclical. Even if the Richat has no connection to Atlantis, exploring the possibility urges us toward humility. Our species is young. Our understanding of prehistoric Africa is incomplete. Every discovery expands the horizon. Every question reveals another layer. The Richat structure endures as a monument to curiosity, a geological wonder, a mythic silhouette, a puzzle with missing pieces. And perhaps that is why it matters. Not because it answers questions, but because it asks them. In the end, the possibility that remains is simple. We do not know. But not knowing is fertile ground. It is the soil in which imagination, science, and exploration grow. The Sahara has swallowed many stories. Perhaps Atlantis is one of them. But whether Atlantis once stood here or not, the eye of the Sahara teaches us something timeless: that the world is stranger, older, and more mysterious than our textbooks admit. Some truths hide in plain sight, visible only from the right angle. As the sun sets over the Richat, its rings glow softly in the desert haze, like the memory of a memory. You can feel the echo of something ancient, something vast,
something unfinished. The land itself seems to breathe with possibility. And so Part 9 ends where all exploration begins, with a question. Not, did Atlantis exist, but what else has the Earth forgotten? If the Sahara truly holds the ruins of an unknown civilization, then the greatest chapter of human history is still buried, waiting for us to remember.